So welcome to another comparison video, and this time I have a unique opportunity in front of me because I did just get my Utopia today and I'll be shipping out the Elear in the next few days. So I have the chance to compare the two in terms of a pad swap. Now this isn't a comparison of the headphones in their stock form. This is specifically just the pad swapping that I'm talking about, because I have heard online some people saying if you put the Utopia pads on the Elear, it becomes very close frequency response wise to Utopia. But then again, that was the old Utopia measurements on inner fidelity before it was discovered that Tile's original model was a little different than the others. So what's going on, I don't know. But while I have the opportunity, why don't I just go ahead and try them myself. So this is, on the right you have the Focal Utopia with Elear pads on it. So this is the pads of my old Elear. This was packed up, I brought it out to try it on. I've tried it on for a bit, and whatever you hear in this comparison video actually is already stuff I knew, because a few weeks ago I went to my local store, Audio Sanctuary, and I tried out this, I sat there for a few hours and tried the two headphones and pad swap between them. Got a very good impression on both of them of what the pad swapping actually does, and today I just confirmed that, so I can just talk about them quickly in a video. On the other hand, you have the Elear. This is the Elear that I have for sale with the brand new Utopia pads on them. So you've got the lambskin perforated Utopia pads right there. So let's start with just a quick aside. I know some people prefer the Utopia with the Elear pads. Now some of these people include, I believe, Jude, the admin of Headfire. I went on his profile once and he actually had written he has a Utopia which he uses with the Elear pads, which I thought was a little strange, but then I looked into why people could do that, want to do that, and it's because they say it increases the bass and slightly increases the sub-bass reach. Now, the Utopia sub-bass extension is not that far. In fact, the Elear's is even more. So something like that, should make sense, right? And it does. It does bump up the bass a bit. It does bump up the bass volume in the mid-bass and the extension of the sub-bass, but I think this is not ideal. I think if you have a Utopia, you should really just enjoy it for what it's doing instead of trying to change it in that aspect a little bit, because I have nothing against pad rolling. I've done it before with other headphones and I've really found really great experiences with that, like with the HE500 and the ZMF pads. But in this case, I don't think it's a good idea, because what the Utopia does, I do believe it needs the perforated pads that it comes with to do that, because it has a very open sound. It has a very natural tonality, where even though the soundstage is very quite narrow, it doesn't feel like you're running out of room. It doesn't feel like you're hitting any walls in terms of sound. It doesn't feel like you are running out of space in the mix, or you're running out of space for the headphone to show like really hectic instrumentals. It won't run out of space. With the Elear pads, it does. Now, so you can call that words like slightly muddier, a little fuzzier in the mix, or a little fuzzier in how the presentation is, but I don't think it's ideal. I think it does detract from the clarity, the ultimate clarity, which I have not heard in other dynamic headphones by anyone that the Utopia has, and I do think that the Elear pads take that away. In fact, I would actually say that with the Elear pads, you bring this towards the Elear more, but you don't bring it towards what it can do in terms of the Elear's strengths, that some things that even the Utopia doesn't have. You won't recreate that with these pads. You really won't. Even though you will get the bass, you won't get that really crunchy sound that the Elear has. A bit more, I would say, a little shoutier, and some people call it a little grainier sound, which is really good in my opinion with metal guitars and rock guitars and stuff like that. You're not really going to get that with the Elear pads on the Utopia, but you will get a sense that you're filling out the mix a little bit too much and you are losing some of that clarity, the ultimate resolution that the Utopia is known for. So there is that. The upper mids are not very veiled. I know the veiled upper mids of the Elear, you can't replicate that with the Utopia, even with these pads, but it's still not the open sound that I would really like from the Utopia in its stock form. So even though Jude from Headfire and some other people do prefer this, I personally do not. Now let's move into this comparison. Now this is what I've been hearing. This is what people have been telling me. This is what people were saying. Yo, just go ahead and buy yourself those Utopia pads. Put them on your Elear. And of course they're joking, but put them on the Elear and you end up with a much cheaper Utopia. Well guys, that is not the case. That is not the case. When you put these on, first of all, the first thing you're going to notice is the really slightly bassier, mid-bassier sound of the Elear has diminished. You will end up, in fact, I would actually say the sub-bass extension compared to the stock Utopia is less. Meaning the Elear with Utopia pads has even less sub-bass extension than the stock Utopia with its own pads. And it doesn't sound very, in my opinion, it doesn't sound very well put together. I would actually say that the Elear with the Elear has a certain characteristic, like I said, the shoutiness of the mids, which if you put on the Utopia pads, you will get more of that sense. It is a sense that I would say is something that you could have originally replicated by turning the Elear up very high in volume. So if you're a loud volume listener, I wouldn't even recommend you buying an Elear in stock form, because I think it is a headphone which it kind of loses its sense up in the higher volume ranges. Its FR becomes a little messed up, becomes a little too shouty. It becomes very harsh actually, I have to be honest. So for somebody like me who listens on medium high volume, the Elear was in stock form was just a fantastic headphone for its price. But when you put the Utopia pads on, it's like you don't even have to increase the volume so much. You are just reaching that really shouting nature of the Elear without even having to pump the volume so much. It gets quite a bit harsh, I must admit. And the things that people say that this could have fixed, these pads, the Utopia pads and the Elear, could have fixed on the Elear were things like the upper mid-range, where the Elear is quite dipped. It doesn't fix that so much. I went and listened to some female vocals. Did not get the sense that they were more forward in the mix. I didn't get the sense that they were even less slightly distant than they were before. This is not something that's going to fix that in my opinion. It does make the overall sound of the headphone airier though. Definitely does do that. In fact, I would actually say that the upper treble actually becomes a little more emphasized than before. Like, I haven't seen a graph that can prove this, but just from what I hear, it feels like it just is more of a peak than it was before. Because usually you have the 9K, 10K peak on the treble of the Elear, but it feels like that's even more exacerbated now. And it's not what I remember listening to. I feel like that's emphasized and it becomes overall quite a bright headphone compared to before, where it's a little more balanced and maybe a little in the bassy side of things, yeah, a little lower heavy. So when you put the Utopia pads on, it becomes very top heavy, but it doesn't give you the very natural sense the Utopia does. Yes, there's a little bit more separation in some instrumental tracks, but when you listen to vocals, you're not going to find it very pleasing. Male vocals sound pretty much the same, I would say, as before, but female vocals don't sound any better on the Elear with Utopia pads than they do on the Utopia. So just putting this little thing to rest, I think these are both fantastic headphones. Even after all this time, some people have to complain to me about the Elear with their beliefs that it's a little too shouty, with the upper mids too dipped. Yeah, I know, but that is the characteristic of this headphone that I really liked with many genres of music, and to this day, until today when I got the Utopia, it was the headphone which I much preferred with metal music and rock music for its very accurate depiction of guitar sounds, which is something I also hear in Grotto headphones, in case you're wondering. So I wouldn't call either one of these pairings ideal. This is just a fun little video I wanted to do to talk about this while I have the chance to show it on camera instead of just typing down my impressions for Reddit or somebody to read. Yeah, I don't think this, in fact, if I had to choose between the two, this is a tough one. Because on the left side, you have a headphone where it loses its characteristics because it's trying to take on the characteristics of another headphone. It becomes very harsh because of the, if you listen to it even on medium high volume, it's going to become a bit too harsh to me. And on the other side, you have the Utopia with the Elear pads, brings it closer to the Elear level, but you don't want to do that if you have a Utopia. You don't want it to share those characteristics so much, because that whatever you are paying for with the Utopia whatever that natural, really nice tonality it has, the really nice sound that it has, a really open feeling headphone that it is, even though it doesn't have be wide in soundstage. You don't want to put barriers on that, saying, okay, you're gonna get more bass, you're gonna get more bass, but you're gonna put it right here in the middle. Instead of having no barriers, it's suddenly like this. It's not too much. It's not all that much, but it's something you can definitely hear if you're used to the stock Utopia. So this much, even this much, is just too much difference in my opinion. I can't personally enjoy this. If people want to do this to their Utopia, where they want to put Elear pads on their Utopia, I wouldn't, even though it doesn't sound completely like the Elear, I would just advise them to get an Elear instead, because unless you want to really experience the Utopia for what it actually is, then you're not doing the right thing by putting Elear pads in Utopia. Well, that's been my quick video, and thank you, and I will see you next time. Cheers.